What is an experiment? Experiment, an investigation looking for a causal relationship in which an independent variable is manipulated and is expected to be responsible for changes in the dependent variable. What is a variable? A variable is any kind of attribute or characteristic that you are trying to measure, manipulate, and control in statistics and research. All studies analyze a variable, which can describe a person, place, thing, or idea. A variable's value can change between groups or over time. For example, if the variable in an experiment is a person's eye color, its value can change from brown to blue to green from person to person. How many variables are in an experiment? Every experiment has at least two variables, an independent variable and a dependent variable. The independent variable is what you are testing, and the dependent variable is the result. Any other variables in your experiment build on or affect the independent or dependent variables. Most experiments also include a controlled variable. You can usually identify the type of variable you're working with by asking two questions: what type of data does the variable contain, and what part of the experiment does the variable represent? Different types of variables are given. Independent variables, a variable that stands alone and isn't changed by other variables or factors that are measured. For example, age. Other variables such as where someone lives, what they eat, or how much they exercise are not going to change their age. Dependent variable, a variable that relies on and can be changed by other factors that are measured. For example, a grade someone gets on an exam depends on factors such as how much sleep they got and how long they studied. Quantitative variables, data sets that involve numbers or amounts. Examples: height, distance, or number of items. Types: discrete and continuous. Discrete, any numerical variables you can realistically count, such as the coins in your wallet or the money in your savings account. Continuous, numerical variables that you could never finish counting, such as time. Qualitative variables, non-numerical values or groupings. Example: eye color or dog breed. Types: binary, nominal, and ordinal. Binary, variables with only two categories, such as male or female, red or blue. Nominal, variables you can organize in more than two categories that do not follow a particular order. Take, for example, housing types: single-family home, condominium, tiny home. Ordinal, variables you can organize in more than two categories that follow a particular order. Take, for example, level of satisfaction: unsatisfied, neutral, satisfied. Intervening variables, a theoretical variable used to explain a cause or connection between other study variables. Moderating variables, a variable that changes the relationship between dependent and independent variables by strengthening or weakening the intervening variable's effect. Extraneous variables, factors that affect the dependent variable but that the researcher did not originally consider when designing the experiment. Example: parental support, prior knowledge of a foreign language, or socioeconomic status are extraneous variables that could influence a study assessing whether private tutoring or online courses are more effective at improving students' Spanish test scores. Confounding variables. Extra variables that the researcher did not account for that can disguise another variable's effects and show false correlations. Example: in a study of whether a particular genre of movie affects how much candy kids eat, with experiments are held at 9 a.m., noon, and 3 p.m. time could be a confounding variable, as the group in the noon study might be hungrier and therefore eat more candy because lunchtime is typically at noon. A confounding variable is a type of extraneous variable that is associated with both the independent and dependent variables. An extraneous variable is anything that could influence the dependent variable. These unwanted variables can unintentionally change a study's results or how a researcher interprets those results. A confounding variable influences the dependent variable, and also correlates with or causally affects the independent variable. Confounding variables can invalidate your experiment results by making them biased or suggesting a relationship between variables exists when it does not. Control variables, characteristics that are constant and do not change during a study. Example, in an experiment about plant development, control variables might include the amounts of fertilizer and water each plant gets. These amounts are always the same so that they do not affect the plant's growth. Composite variables, two or more variables combine to make a more complex variable. Example, overall health is an example of a composite variable if a researcher uses other variables, such as genetics, medical care, education, quality of environment and chosen behaviors, to determine overall health in an experiment. How do you control confounding variables? Ways to control confounding variables so they do not affect the results of your experiment include: adjustment, adjust study parameters to account for the confounding variable and minimize its effects. Matching, compare study groups with the same degree of confounding variables. Multivariate analysis, use when analyzing multiple variables at once. Randomization, spread confounding variables evenly between study groups. Restriction, remove subjects or samples that have confounding factors. Stratification, create study subgroups in which the confounding variable does not vary or vary much. Thank you for watching Quick Notes. Please subscribe for more notes.